responsibility of the county Republican Party recruits the Republican poll workers, and the county Democratic Party recruits the Democratic poll workers. And so we need to get our county parties in some stances stepping up to fulfill this need. They have great grassroots networks. They have great lists of people and social media presences. So these county parties need to step up. For example, I noticed that in my native Summit County, where I've got a lot of friends and family members, and many of them are signing up to be poll workers, we have a shortage of over 800 Republican poll workers we still need to fill. And I know that those folks that have signed up need to get a call back so that they can get scheduled for training. In Butler County, they're reporting a shortage of 350 Democratic poll workers. And so we need Democrats in Butler County to step up and make sure that they fill that need. And it's not surprising. In some of our rural counties, the need is more profound for Democratic poll workers. In some of our urban counties, the need is more profound for Republican poll workers. No surprises there. And so we need to help them get to where they need to be, because every polling location needs to have that bipartisan representation. If anybody watched the debate this week, you probably heard the president talk about poll watchers. That's something that's allowed in Ohio's statute. We call them election observers. Of course, they have to swear an oath and they have to be certified and credentialed. They're not allowed to interfere with voters. In fact, they really just have to be a fly on the wall and stand off to the side and then report something if they see it come up to their own party's legal team or to the Board of Elections. But you know what's much better than being a poll watcher is being a poll worker. And so if you are motivated to help make sure that we have a fair and an honest election and make sure that the laws of Ohio are enforced at every one of our polling locations, instead of signing up to be a poll watcher, sign up to be a poll worker. You're going to have a much greater impact on the work that's actually done at our county boards of elections. Let's see here. And so again, I have heard, and this is a little concerning, from some individuals that have signed up to be poll workers and haven't heard from their county board of elections yet. I've been very clear that my expectation is that the county board of elections will contact voters within a week of when they sign up to be poll workers. We can't have people signing up and then not hearing back. I know that our boards of elections are already working late hours and weekends and everything else, but we do need to make sure that we are contacting. And there's a variety of ways that we can contact them. We can give them a phone call. We can send them an email. But they need to know, once they've signed up to be a poll worker, they need to know that we need you and we're going to get you trained. And so stand by, and we're going to get you, signed up and up and running. Because when these people have expressed this sincere desire to be a part of the process here in Ohio, we don't need to, take them for granted. We need to make sure that we're communicating with them. You know what? We also want them to come back in 2021. I think there's a silver lining here. I think that this is the year that we recruit a whole new generation of poll workers, and we honor those that have been poll workers for years. They're amazing people, and that experience is so important. But I think there's a whole new generation of energetic Ohioans that are excited to be a part of this civic process, and we want them back in 2021 and 22 and beyond. We want to start good lifelong habits of civic engagement here. To talk a little bit about election observers, because I know that has come up. Obviously, as I said earlier, they are recruited by the parties and by the candidates. They have to be they have to be credentialed to do this. They have to take an oath. But again, what's more important than being an election watcher is being an election worker, and that's why we would ask people to do just that. Now, moving on to the next thing, poll worker recruitment is important, but we also want to help take the pressure off of Election Day by encouraging Ohioans to take advantage of early voting and absentee voting. Early voting gives you the chance to have that in-person Election Day experience. It's just like voting at your polling location. You get your sticker, you get to put the ballot in the scanner or in the box, and you have that same in-person experience that you have enjoyed for years. And so we're really encouraging Ohioans to think of election month, not election day, and that election month begins on October 6th rather, here in Ohio at 8 a.m. And as you can see, 3 days to go until that happens. And that's something that we're all excited about. But we're also really excited that record numbers of Ohioans are stepping up and requesting an absentee ballot. We just announced that over 2 million Ohioans have already requested their absentee ballots. And everybody that works at boards of elections knows this. You're seeing record numbers of absentee ballot requests coming in. You've never seen the numbers that you're seeing right now, I would anticipate. And let's think about this. It's early October. And at this point in 2016 or 2012 or 2008. We were at well under 1 million. So we've already doubled the number that we would have been at this point in other elections. And I believe that number is only going to continue climbing. And speaking of ready for November, our county boards of elections are ready for this. They've used the CARES dollars that we've sent them to invest in new mail handling equipment. Again, something simple like that machine that cuts open envelopes. That's been a big improvement. They've brought on extra staff. And so on October 6th, when they can start sending out those absentee ballots, they're going to be getting ahead of the game in many ways. And actually, for members of the task force, do you want to talk a little bit about things that you're doing to deal with the large numbers of absentee ballots that you're seeing coming in, absentee ballot requests rather?
I can start. And first of all, I like to say that maybe Lisa and I are from smaller counties and don't quite have the volume as Rob and Brian, but remember the percentage. We have the same exact percentage, and on a smaller basis, we have 3 full-time employees. So think of how we're processing ballots as well, even as the large counties. And we have right around 5,900 applications. And for the general in 2016, we had 6,122 total absentees. That was in person and by mail. So for all Glaze County, that seems overwhelming. But again, like you said, with the CARES Act money, we were able to get a slicer to open the mail and a ballot folder. And after we used that ballot folder, I was like, how had we ever lived without this? And just the opportunity with this money to be able to get those and procure and have those things to use now in the future. So we actually have poll workers that come in and work and can be paid. The board voted on an amount and they can be paid through the CARES Act. And so we are up and ready. Today, we will have all ballots stuffed. And then we will only have to put postage on those Monday and all the applications in. And we haven't really had to work till midnight. So with these new additions, it's been great. We had Girl Scouts come this week. They took a tour of the office, and it seriously was it just feel good moment. We took a tour, we educated them. And then they put together voter bags. We have voter bags that the voter's going to be able to pick up at the polling location. And they actually have a mask, a sticker, a glove, and a pen. You can throw that away when you leave. And this takes 2 different things where the poll worker would have to actually physically hand the voter something. So they had a competition, and they could only be here 20 minutes. They had a competition. Whoever had the most would get ice cream. And those 4 girls who are working on silver awards and gold awards and getting community service packed over 200 of those bags in less than 20 minutes, which would take care of one of our small precincts. So
Michelle,
take the opportunity.
I hope you got pictures of that, because
I did.
As we celebrate the 100th anniversary of women getting the right to vote, to see these young Ohioans stepping up and participate in the process is so cool.
And they can't be poll workers, but they're actually going to take small shifts, and we're calling them trustees, and they're actually wearing those T-shirts that day on election day to come in and help sanitize and such. So which takes the relief off of some of our poll workers. So even the honor society says, Wapak and St. Mary's are 2 big rivalry schools here in Glaze County. We actually had the guidance counselor call from Wapak and Netta, and they had 27 youth at the booth sign up. Guess what? Awesome. We didn't say we're full. We said bring them on, and we had them, and we train them, and we're going to find a job for them, or they're going to be subs and ready to go. Don't turn away anybody. Just bring them and go ahead. I don't care if I have to do an emergency training Monday before the election. That's what we do so that we can take everything, all the opportunity of everybody and include anybody that wanted involved.
Rob, this conversation is all about bringing the diverse voices of elections officials together, because Auglaize County is much smaller than Cuyahoga County, but they're seeing a huge volume. You guys have truckloads of ballots you're probably ready to send out on Tuesday. Can you talk about some of the things that you guys are doing in one of Ohio's biggest counties, Rob?
Sure. One thing I would really want to focus on is the partnership that we have with the United States Postal Service here and the great communication that we have. And so there's been a lot of media coverage about, what is the state of our Postal Service and that. And I can tell you the confidence level we have and all that coverage and all that conversation about it has really helped drive that to make sure that our director and his staff are really drilling down in to find if there are any gaps, any holes in that. To make sure that we're receiving those timely and that our mail is going out timely. We are way ahead of where we would be in any normal year in terms of volume, and we consider that a good thing. We're ready to be sending out ballots next Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday because the volume is so big, they won't all go out on the first day. But what that also does is with the largest voting jurisdiction in the state, we're concerned about crowds and lines, and in this era of COVID, spacing and keeping social distance on election day. And so every voter that can request that ballot, request it early, get it back early, they can track that ballot is a very good thing. And I want to thank the Secretary. We had some discussion earlier this week. We were concerned about how those ballots come back. Yeah, the Postal Service is a key, but so is that drop box we have in our back parking lot. But our back parking lot, that traffic is going to get pretty congested come just about a week and a half from now, let alone as we near in on Halloween and November 1st, 2nd, 3rd. And so to have the ability to expand that a bit, to ease the traffic flow across the street, adjacent from our location, and be able to have that ballot pickup and drop off by voters is really going to help alleviate those logistical concerns as well.
Rob, let's talk a little bit more about that because, of course, for generations, Ohioans have known that when you vote absentee, the easiest way to return it is to mail it back in, and that's trustworthy. Ohioans can track it. We know that as long as your ballot is postmarked by November 2nd, it will count in that final official certification of the election result. We don't want people to wait that long. We want them to mail them in as soon as they get it. But we also know that for some people, dropping them off at the Board of Elections is the best way to go. Some people like to do that. The law allows for that. Of course, the section of the Ohio Code that talks about how you return an absentee ballot lays out 3 scenarios. You mail it in, which is the most common, or you personally deliver it to the director of the Board of Elections, or you have a family member personally deliver it to the director. And so personally delivering it to the director includes, by the way, the drop boxes that exist at every county Board of Elections. This is the first time in our state's history that we've had that for a general election. This is another one of those improvements that has come about as a result of this difficult situation that we're in, that convenience is now available at each of Ohio's 88 county boards of elections. But also, I know that some people want to, bring it back in person. And I know, Rob, you've talked about the work that Cuyahoga County does. I believe that's something that you guys have done in past years before, where you set up that ballot drop off at the Board of Elections in the days leading up. I know Franklin County does something similar out here on Morse Road, where they put cones in their parking lot and they have sort of a drive-through drop off at the Board of Elections. This is something that you guys have been doing for a while, Rob?
We have, and but this year has allowed us to institutionalize it more and formalize it. I think it has appeared to the voter, perhaps, or the passerby, to be somewhat ad hoc before. It was well thought out even in the past. It was very secure. It was with bipartisan teams taking custody of the ballots. But now with what we went through in the spring and the extending out of that March primary and the added abilities we had, and then through the work of this task force, the discussions you had with the legislature and the discussions that your team had with the many boards, we now have a very solid plan where voters can know that is actually an authorized way for them to come down here, not experience long lines, not even have to get out of their car, drop that ballot off and know that it is received at the Board of Elections. It is in bipartisan custody, and it will be secure until the time that it is opened, flattened, scanned, and tabulated and reported. And so we thank you for everything you're doing on those issues as well.
That's awesome. Lisa or Brian, anything that you guys are doing as far as drop-offs at your Board of Elections where people some that choose not to mail in their absentee ballot, they want to deliver it in person? Any thoughts?
Yeah, just, add on what Rob said, the ballot box we've had for years. We just had to reinvent a little, some things because, we were getting congestion at our door because that's where a drop box was. So we were able to add, like Rob did, an additional drop box on our property to create a drive-through. So somebody doesn't even have to get out of their car. So, boards do need to look at that where they do have that high volume areas that, I think it's going to work out really well for us in and out of the parking lot. We're at 28% right now of absentee ballot requests, 28% of our registered voters, which is just going to help us on election day. I mean, even more. Fewer people to go out at the polls because they've already early voted, to help with those lines. All these calls have been so beneficial. I've learned a lot. Hopefully everybody else has too. About Cedar Fair. I think we learned a lot from them about line management, something that I've taken and added on to. I got signs made up. We're going to have, signs 30 minutes from this point, 60 minutes from this point. And, I just think, organization is the key here. And I think we're about there. And if Michelle, you're all caught up with your ballots, I'll expect you here Saturday and Sunday then. Won't be long of a drive for you.
Hey, Brian, I think it's great to highlight what you all have done there where you have your walk-up drop-box location, but at the Board of Elections, you've also got a drive-up location. That's smart to help manage that flow as people are bringing their ballots back, and that's a good idea.
And we've actually, we went live out there too when it just gets too much of a line. We'll have 2 employees out there with a ballot box, just grabbing it from the from the voters that come in. So, I mean, we're pretty flexible with that, I think.
That's smart. And I think that a lot of our boards have a plan like that. As I've visited many of the boards, they say, hey, we work with the county engineer and we put one of those lighted signs up that say ballot drop-offs this way. And that way they bring people through in their cars and they can get it done and get it done efficiently without creating a traffic tie-up around the Board of Elections. Lisa, anything you guys are doing on this?
We love the drop box. We never had that before. And we are located at the end of a long hallway, and the elderly do not enjoy making that long trip down. Now, in the past, we have had people that we know regularly vote absentee, and they will call us and we'll slip out the back door to get their ballot from them. But this drop box has added so much more to our ability to help people. We've also put a real estate flyer box on the side of our drop box. So people have been picking up registration forms to register to vote. They've been picking up absentee applications because, after hours, after 5 o'clock, our building closes, we're in here working, but, people are still needing those forms. So we added that to the side of ours, and we have received fantastic accolades for that because people are like, we didn't know how we would get in while you were open.
That's awesome. And I really think that lessons that we're learning this year really are going to pay dividends for a long time to come. This is one of these experiences that none of us would have wished for, but having gone through this as a team of professionals and having learned and flexed our plans and been creative about things, I really believe that into the future in 21 and 22 and 23 and for years to come, that Ohio's elections officials will be stronger as a result of the work that we're doing. And the drop boxes at the county boards of elections, those secure 24/7 drop boxes is just one example. The live drop offs that you were talking about, Rob and Brian, at your county board and having that set up, and just some of the creativity that we're bringing to bear, I think is going to pay dividends for a long time to come.
Mr. Secretary, can I make one other comment as a public service announcement here? We do have many voters who have not voted by mail before who are requesting ballots. In Cuyahoga County, we have nearly 300,000 applications as of today. Of those, we have some applications that are found to be not valid. We've had over 40,000 that were not valid when initially received, and of those, 10 or 11,000 have already been corrected. They are now valid by providing missing information. But of the 30,000 that are still not valid, so 10% of the applications we've received, 2/3 of those are for the failure to provide a date of birth. And so there's a lot of information on there, but the number one issue we see with invalid applications is a failure to provide date of birth. So we want everyone to be carrying that message, and it's twofold. One, we need you to provide complete information. We want you to get your ballot. And number two, if you don't, your board is going to be following up with you. You have a chance to correct that application and help us get you your ballot. And so every voter, particularly if you haven't voted by mail before, do track that ballot application, do track the status of your ballot, and don't wait until November 2nd or even worse, the 3rd to say, hey, I never got mine. So it's going to be a constant communication effort, and we'll keep working on that up here in Cuyahoga County.
Thanks for mentioning that, Rob. And we knew that this was going to be a year that we were going to see a lot of first-time absentee voters, and we want them to have a good customer service experience. We want them to keep voting this way, right? Because voting absentee is a convenient way to do it. We redesigned the absentee ballot application and try to highlight that date of birth. And I think oftentimes people will put today's date in there instead of date of birth. And so, nobody who's born in 2020 is eligible to be a voter. And so don't put the today's date instead of your date of birth. But also we redesigned the instruction forms that come with the absentee ballots. And we worked with a group called the Center for Civic Design to make sure that form was easier to understand and that puts right on there the amount of postage that you need and really goes through the way that you can return your ballot either by mail or to drop it off at the County Board of Elections. Are you all using all of those new forms that we've sent out? Do you think that that's going to be helpful? Okay, good. And then also, in many cases, we've redesigned the envelopes working with county boards of elections. I know some counties are going to exhaust their supply of the old envelopes, and those are fine. But then we've got new envelopes that we've designed that I think will be efficient and recognizable as they move through the postal stream. And that's something else that I wanted to highlight. Anything else on absentee and early voting before we move on? All right, next I want to talk about some of the highlights because we've had some great conversations here at the Ready for November Task Force. And I'm going to start with health guidance. We heard loud and clear from our fellow elections officials early on that there was local guidance, there was CDC guidance, there was Ohio Department of Health guidance, all of that well-informed and professional, but in some ways it was almost overwhelming. And so what they asked us to do is come up with a concise checklist of what do we need to do. And what that resulted in was this document right here, the 48-point checklist that the county boards of elections all got, almost 2 months ago at this point, that lays out, and this was done in collaboration with the CDC, as well as the Ohio Department of Health and all of us as Ohio's elections officials. And it lays out the common sense steps that we have to follow to create safe environments and healthy environments for our early voting in person, as well as our election day in-person voting. And here's the clear message on this. If you feel comfortable going to the grocery store, you should feel comfortable coming to your polling location. In fact, maybe even more so. The health protocols that we're following are stringent and well-resourced. We've got the materials and supplies that we're going to need. We're still working to get some of that out there, but your polling location, whether it's the early vote center or whether it's your neighborhood polling location, will be a safe and healthy environment. And that's something that we're trying to highlight for everybody. Signage. I believe that it's important to have very clear signage at polling locations and at the early voting center. And so what we have provided is template signage that the boards of elections can print off, and in some cases, signage that we're producing ourselves, so that there will be clear messaging when you show up to vote. Voters will know that they are expected to wear a mask, and if they don't have one, that one will be provided for them. And if they don't want that they'll have the opportunity to vote curbside. And so we're making sure that they understand that they should feel comfortable and confident coming in to their polling location. We also learned best practice from nationwide experts on election law. We heard from Ohio's own Ned Foley on preparation, an expert in academia. We heard from opportunities for Ohioans with disabilities, because when we say every vote matters, that's exactly what it means. Regardless of your physical or cognitive abilities, we believe that every Ohio voter, every eligible voter in Ohio deserves to have their voice heard. And so we go to great lengths to make sure that we create an accessible and welcoming and equitable environment. Ohioans with disabilities should have the same dignified voting experience that everyone else has. And so we were happy to work with Ohioans with disabilities, opportunities for Ohioans with disabilities to make sure that we are accessible and inclusive. Of course, we had fun with this one. We brought in the experts from Cedar Fair, the amusement park company that operates Cedar Point. These folks know how to manage large lines. We work really hard to avoid lines. That's what the last conversation was all about with early voting and absentee voting. We're trying to encourage people to take advantage of those because we don't want to see lines, but we know that a line with people standing 6 feet apart looks a lot longer. And so we don't want people to be discouraged if they see that line. We want them to know that they should get in line, they should maintain the distance between them and the next voter, and then they should be ready to cast their vote. And so working with Cedar Fair at the real experts at line management. Brian, I know that you had some ideas for keeping people informed while they're informed and entertained, I would say, while they're in line. What are you guys doing down there at the Warren County Board of Elections?
Yeah, kind of jumped ahead earlier, but yeah, we're, we are having the wait signs out in our parking lot doing time studies out there. And then on high peak times, we have a part-time employee that dresses up as Uncle Sam that'll be, walking around in our parking lot. And, we do have other employees scheduled to be out in our parking lot too, to monitor the lines and everything else. So, I think that just helps. It puts kind of brightens somebody's day sometimes that might be come to the Board of Elections, not in the best of moods or stuff like that, and kind of hopefully brightens people's day and makes it more enjoyable to stand in a long line than just sitting there with nothing to do. So the other thing we learned is giving the voters something to do while they're in line, give them literature, give them something to read to help distract the time that they are there. So we're going to take advantage of everything that we learned off of those calls here.
Anybody else on ideas for line management, things that you're doing at your early voting center or at your voting locations? I know, Rob, you guys got a whole redesigned early voting center. It's purpose built. You guys put this together long before anybody had ever heard of COVID-19, but thank God you did, because you guys are going to have a much more efficient flow of voters through the Cuyahoga County early vote location.
Yes, thank you for pointing that out. We had a hurdle here in Cuyahoga County, and we were addressing it at the end of last year. And it is a fortunate instance now that we undertook last fall to start a reconstruction of our first floor to make it a more conducive early voting center. And now downstairs, I'm up on the 4th floor, but down on our first floor, they are outfitting that with hanging sheeting, plastic sheeting, so that we can have the voting booths in there. But just like when you go to a restaurant and you see the plexiglass between tables where they can't be 6 feet apart. Well, here we have plastic sheeting between voting booths where they can't be 6 feet apart, so that we can be processing through in a safe manner a high volume of voters in that early vote center. And we also have done things with line management where more of the voters in normal times will be able to be waiting inside, not outside. Now, we do know that as the volume gets really heavy, that line will be snaking around. So we've now picked up some tips from Brian Sleeth down in Warren County about how to keep all those voters who are waiting in these long lines entertained. So yet another reason this is a great task force exercise here.
Rob, are you going to be dressing up as Uncle Sam?
I did not say that. I will not.
That's awesome. Anybody else on management?
I just wanted to mention as well, and it's just about voter education and also educating your poll workers that maybe, that the footprint of your precinct is going to look a little different. Whether you have, your blue tape on the floor, pushing back tables, getting 2 tables out, maybe putting your machine over by the exit so they can enter and exit in one way. But it's been a great way to actually educate the poll workers and the public. Talk to your service groups that it's going to look a little different this time, and what your expectations are what the expectations of the voter. I take along that CDC report and I say, these are the guidelines we're going to follow. So I did that also for the poll workers. And when I talk then maybe at the Rotary, I say, this is what the expectations are going to be. And this is how the polling location is going to look. And do newspaper interviews so the voter knows what to expect once they get there. So really do outreach and talk to stakeholders and educate them on what the process is going to be and maybe what you've done for this election. That, let's be honest, like you said, this is what's going to be great for future elections as well.
Michelle, to add to that, you may have heard me talk about this, but we're going to be doing a video soon that sort of goes through the example polling location that shows all of those protocols. We'll bring members of the press through that so that they can see visually what the layout of these locations will be like. One indoor separate from an outdoor, using door stops to hold doors open, having the signage and the distance between the machine, and where you can't have a distance between the voter and the poll worker, having a sneeze guard in place, and of course the right personal protective equipment, all of these things. And it's so important to communicate that so that we can reinforce for voters that if they do choose to vote in person, that it's going to be a safe and healthy experience. Nobody should sit out this election because of fear of the pandemic. That's the bottom line. There are good options for you. Anything, no matter what your lifestyle, there's a good option for you. If you have, if you have profound concerns and you maybe have a compromised immune system, then yes, absolutely, voting absentee, voting by mail is going to be the best thing for you. But for most everybody else, we want them to know and be confident that they can come to the voting location and cast their ballot, get their I voted sticker, and be on their way, right? Yeah. Anything else on that? Wanted to keep moving. We had an elections official from Kentucky who was sharing her experience with what they had dealt with in their primary. Fun idea that came from that. They were using badminton rackets to direct people so people could see it from a distance, to show them which way to go and maintain line management. Of course, we had great conversations with some experts on postal voting, people like Tammy Patrick, who's a nationally recognized expert. And of course, we had folks from the United States Postal Service that came on and talked about the things that they're using. Of course, use of that official elections mail logo. We're all familiar with that, but everybody needs to look for that little swoosh with the stars. That's a certified and copyrighted logo that lets you know that what you're receiving is official elections related mail. That's also used by the Postal Service throughout the process so that they know that this is mail that of course all mail gets good handling, but that's pieces of mail that have special handling. We heard from the U.S. Postal Service that elections mail is their top priority. They didn't qualify that or say it's one of our top priorities. They said elections mail is the top priority for the U.S. Postal Service. They talked about working with our local counterparts in the Postal Service. The USPS is a huge organization, but what it comes down to is very dedicated, hardworking people at the local level, just like us, and establishing those relationships so that your local elections official has a personal relationship with your local postmaster, and they exchange cell phone numbers, and they know how to reach each other if they need to late at night or on the weekend. And that kind of thing is really important as well. Of course, that all clear procedure that the Postal Service has committed to go through their sorting facilities and make sure that none of that elections related mail is stuck in the process or put off to the side. And then, of course, the commitment to make sure that Ohio mail will be sorted in Ohio. In some instances, and I know this is particularly a concern in the Toledo region, where mail had been shipped to Detroit for sorting, and that may have been more efficient for the Postal Service, but it was costing time for the mail customer. And so they've committed to keeping that sorting here in Ohio for that elections related mail. And so that's so important as well. Any other highlights that any of you want to share, the things that came out of these conversations that you wanted to talk about?
One I'll mention for the purpose of my role on this task force, but also our board generally, for our board members remaining informed, our director and deputy here developed a poll worker recruitment dashboard. And that is also now an instance of taking where there was a mistake or a foible and turning it into a positive. I think we all know there may be human mistakes made between now and November 3rd. The question isn't, are we perfect? The question is, what do we do when mistakes are made? And so here in Cuyahoga County, there was a message that went out that, hey, we had all the poll workers we need. No, we don't. Even though I say we're ready for November, part of that is that we are continuing as we go into October, recruiting more poll workers. Now we have 90% recruited, but we need to be to 150%, as you referenced earlier, Mr. Secretary. And so we now have that poll worker dashboard that was really a tool for informing the board. It was an internal tool, tracking tool. That's now up on our website as of this week. And the public can see that, can see where we are. And we very much want the message to continue on October 2nd and 3rd and 5th and 10th that we are still recruiting, we're still training. And as Michelle Wilcox said earlier, if we have to do trainings on the Monday before for additional standbys, we will be doing that. We will have many more poll workers recruited by that point than we think we should need. We believe there will be call-offs or no-shows, and we'll be filling those, and we'll be ready to open on November 3rd, in large part because of the increased good communication that this task force has engendered.
You know, I appreciate you mentioning, Rob, our elections officials are incredibly talented, hardworking people, but they are people. And yes, mistakes can happen. Mistakes can happen, and we learn from those mistakes. It's important also that we own them. And I think that's a part of the culture that just to me is second nature, because it's so much about the way that we do business in the military, particularly in the Special Operations Unit. You know, when you make a mistake, you're the first one to say, hey, my screw up. We learned from it. We're not going to do it again. And that culture is alive and well among elections officials as well. There's no time to wring your hands and cry about it. You say, yep, we screwed up. We're going to learn from it. And here's how we're going to do it better next time. And that's a great example of that, Rob. And I appreciate you pointing that out. Anything else that anyone wants to highlight from these conversations over the last couple of months, lessons learned?
I want to highlight when we had the task force on the Ohio disabilities. As boards of elections, we might have a great, poll worker education and voter outreach, but then there are some spots that I took away from that's where we're lacking in Glades County. Like, we really need to reach out to these groups. And what this group did was really pinpoint maybe different vulnerabilities that our boards have, or that maybe areas that we really needed to work on. And that was something here in Glades County that we had never really. So I reached out to the director of the disabilities, and we got the caseworkers registrations and such. And that's something that, there are things maybe that you don't think about because you're concentrating on other things. When that was awesome with the director Davis, and it just, we had the Zoom meeting with the participants, and it was great.
One of the things I love about elections is it's one of those things that involves all of us, all citizens, all ages and races and socioeconomic. The billionaire votes the same way that the homeless person does. And it's something that I think is truly an opportunity for coming together as a state and a nation. And I think we need some of that. And so I know that elections officials will continue to set that example. The governor talked yesterday about the reason why our polling locations are designated by flags. These polling locations, not to get too philosophical, but these are almost like temples of our democracy. These are special places that we come into to express our sacred right as citizens and to engage in this process. And I know that that's how you all feel about this as well. Obviously, we're not going to tolerate any kind of lawlessness or misbehavior within those bounds. This is something that we all believe in deeply. And this call, like everything in elections, we're half Republicans and half Democrats, but we're here as elections officials. And this is work that we take very seriously. Anybody else have anything to share on lessons learned or things that you wanted to highlight from our Ready for November task force meetings over the last couple months? If not, I'm gonna wrap it up with a couple thoughts and a couple admonitions. As you heard me just say, to me, elections are it's so much more than just an administrative act that we carry out. This truly is the foundation of our way of life. Our representative republic, this democracy that we love, is built on the idea that every man and every woman deserves to have their voice heard in a free and a fair election. And this pandemic has changed a lot about our lives. It's changed the way that we interact, the way that we transact business. It's changed the way that we dress. We all have these masks on, and it's changed so much. But there are things that it will never change. Those are mostly superficial things. And of course, our prayers go out to those who are suffering and those who are recovering, including the first family, by the way. But there are things that will never change. The fact that every person, every citizen deserves to have their voice heard, that elections have to be conducted under the rule of law, that we cannot tolerate lawlessness as it relates to elections. Those are things that are very serious. The fact that the only legitimacy that any government leader has comes from the consent of the governed. I mean, that's a basic idea that underlies all that we do in a democracy. If you don't have the consent of the governed, if the people don't grant you the power that you have as an elected official, you're just a person with flags and a seal, and it means nothing. If you have the consent of the governed, then you're truly able to do positive things at your local, state, and federal level to make our communities stronger and our nation stronger. And that's why the work that we do is so important. And that's why it's so much bigger than party. It's so much bigger than the political parties that any of us belong to. And that's why we would never sacrifice our integrity or the work that we do as elections officials just for some cheap benefit to one party or the other. This is a sacred trust for all of us. For Ohio's elections officials, you all are ready for this. You all are ready for November. I wouldn't want to be in this particular foxhole with anybody else. I wouldn't want to be going into this particular battle with anybody else. And sorry, the military analogies just sort of come naturally to me. But you all are well prepared. You're well equipped. You're dedicated. You've got that fight and that spirit that truly designates a warrior as somebody who's ready for battle. And I know that you're actively communicating with your partners as well. Your county sheriffs, your local health department, your postal service partners, your vendors that you rely on. I know that you're engaging every day in those kind of conversations, and you're preparing for those contingencies and those worst case scenarios, and you're ready truly for November. It's game day. It's time. It's time for us to do this work that we've dedicated our lives to, this work that we know is so important. We know that voter registration deadline is Monday. By the way, we're close to 8 million registered voters. We've never seen that number in the state of Ohio, and we may pass over that number, and that would be a great thing. We know that we're getting people registered to vote, and we know that our boards of elections are staying open late on Monday night so that people that are doing voter registration drives can get those forms in, and the boards of elections can process them. Of course, the forms have to be at the Board of Elections on Monday for someone to get registered to vote, but voter registration online at voteohio.gov will continue up until then as well, and that's really a convenient way to do that. We know that early in-person voting begins Tuesday at 8 a.m. It's easy to vote in Ohio. Anybody that tells you it's not easy to vote is simply not telling the truth. We work hard to make it easy to vote in Ohio. 216 hours of early voting is more than any state in the nation except for 5. The fact that we have evening hours and weekend hours makes us clearly a national leader in early voting. And so you don't have to wait for election day. In Ohio, you have election month. You're not going to, in most cases, you're not going to see lines. It's going to be a convenient experience for you. Of course, we know that absentee ballots start getting mailed out on Tuesday. And we know that Ohioans are going to be eagerly going on voteohio.gov to track those because they want to get them. They want to fill them out, put their postage on them, and mail them back in. We know that on election day, we'll have 13 hours of election day voting, and that Ohioans will be working very hard to make that happen. And we know that when this election is over and when the final certified results are in, we know that Ohioans will have faith that whether their favorite candidates won or lost, that what they saw was the true will of the people of Ohio. They will know that Ohioans will have spoken, and we will respect what Ohioans had to say. That's what democracy is all about. And I'm so proud of each and every one of you that are helping make that happen as Ohio's elections officials. And now let's go get this done, everybody. So God bless the great state of Ohio. God bless our elections officials. Let me end with this. If you're a person of faith, please consider praying for our candidates. By the way, not just the candidates you support, but all of our candidates. They work really hard, and their families sacrifice a lot. It's a lot of long hours. Their staffs put up with a lot. So pray for our candidates, but also pray for our elections officials. These men and women are going to be putting in incredible hours, working under incredible stress. This work is not easy, but it is important, and they're going to do it well. So please continue to keep them in your prayers. Thank you so much, everybody. God bless.